Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to a new week. I hope you've had a great weekend. I hope you got some time to relax and you're refreshed and recharged and ready to make this week the best week of your life. This week, we're going to be talking about trust and how to build trust. And it's interesting to think about trust as something that we build as opposed to like just this thing that happens is important. And I'm going to share a story with you on how I learned about trust as a young person and how it affects me to this very day. So I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. So I want to tell you a quick story about trust. Now, trust is when you behave as I anticipate you would behave. Like we think of trust as like you keep my secrets and those sorts of things. But what trust really is when you show honor and care for me and I can anticipate how you would behave. So that's what trust is. And I'm going to tell you a story when I was in middle school, how I learned about the importance of trust and the way it still impacts me to this day as a 45-year-old. So in middle school, I had a silly little 7th grade crush on a girl named Kendra. And I can't even tell you, like, just a typical boyhood middle school crush. And there was another guy, a friend of mine named Verdell. And he had a crush on the same girl. I did not know that he had a crush on the same girl. He knew that I had a crush on Kendra, but I did not know that he had a crush on Kendra also. So one day, Verdell calls me, and he asks me some questions about Kendra, almost asking me to insult her, like saying things like, you don't think she's very smart. Now, I mean, I don't remember exactly what they were, but it's stuff like that. Like, you don't think she's very smart, do you? And I was like, no, she's not good in math, and like stuff like that. What I didn't realize is he was recording me. Now, of course, it's, 1989 at the time, 88, something like that. So he's not recording me with the crazy devices we have these days. We have like a handheld tape recorder, and he's recording me answering these questions, and later went to play them for Kendra, who ended up not wanting to go to the dance with me or whatever it was. And I remember feeling so violated. I remember feeling so betrayed because you were my friend. I mean, and to be honest with you, as my friend, if he had simply said, hey, I like Kendra as well, I would have probably, because at that time I was so interested in sports and video games, I probably wouldn't have cared. But like he went behind my back and did this thing that I thought was really, really terrible. And it sticks with me to this day in 2 reasons. Number one, I realize that people will do bad things to get what they want, even if it causes you harm. But it also taught me to cherish my meaningful friendships. Because on the flip side, I have friends that I've been friends with for 30 years or more that have been nothing but devoted, loyal, trustworthy friends. And in order to be trustworthy, you just have to be the person that you portray to be to your friend. And that's not hard to do. And I have truly had friends that have been exactly who they portrayed themselves to be over the course of 3 decades. And I've also had friends who have done really horrific, backstabbing, betraying things. Now, I think that 7th grade experience was probably the first time I had it happen, but it certainly was not the last. Like, I've had lots of people in my life that were supposed to be kind, that were supposed to be advocates, that were supposed to be, like, have my back, if you will, and for one reason or another didn't. So try to be the person that you portray to be to the people in your life. Because that's what trust is really about. I can believe in you. I can believe you. I can trust what I'm seeing. I can anticipate who you are. I can rely on you. I can lean on you. That is trust. And once it's gone, it's very, very hard to rebuild. So be the person that your loved ones think you are. It'll make life so, so much easier. So think about what qualities you think it takes to be a trustworthy person, and what can you do to let the people in your life know that they can trust you. Hey, I just want to say thank you guys for being here. It means the world to me that you're continuing to share this podcast, so please keep doing that on your social media platforms and with the people in your personal life. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Simplecast, Spotify, all of the places where you listen to podcasts. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow.
Today I want to share with you maybe the biggest lesson that I have learned in being a practicing psychotherapist. Like something that I did not expect to learn, but through the years, this lesson has been taught to me time and time again by working with my clients. And I think it would make a difference for you too. And it relates to trust and how to rebuild it. So welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons I learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm Elliott Connie, I'm your host, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this today. You know, I tell people all the time, I've been very, very lucky that I've had some amazing professionals in this field be my teachers and mentors and advocates. But the best teachers that I've had have been my clients. Because people say things all the time like, if somebody ever cheats on me, I'm out. Like I have a zero tolerance for this and zero tolerance for that. But I've learned that once trust is broken, it in fact can be rebuilt. People can change and grow. One partner can forgive and the other partner can change. And it is a remarkable thing. So I'm going to tell you a story from a client that I worked with. This particular client, they had an affair, and I'm going to change some of the details because I don't want the client to listen to this and know I'm talking about them and break their confidentiality, but you'll get the point. So this client wanted to have a baby. She wanted to have a baby with her husband and discovered that her husband was cheating on her and was like absolutely devastated. And one of the things that I've learned, by the way, in relationships is there's always two sides, and the husband would say, well, here's why I did it. And even though there's no justifiable reason, I'm with that. But the husband would say, here's why I did it. And the wife was really hurt. And now she's really concerned and I don't want to have a baby and I want to end this relationship. And they came to therapy to see if their relationship was salvageable. And through the therapy, we talked about forgiveness. We talked about change. We talked about accountability. We talked about the husband being different and not hurting her. And I don't know, a month into the therapy, maybe the wife starts feeling like there's a future and she starts thinking about having a baby with the husband again. The husband developed the ability to be more remorseful about what he had done and kind of recommitted to the relationship. And about a year later, I got an email from this couple saying that they had gotten pregnant with twin babies and had recently delivered these twin babies. And the husband was so happy about being able to reclaim their relationship and recommit to one another and becoming a father again. They had one child before this, and now they have these two twins that have arrived. And that was probably 10 years ago. To this day, I get a Christmas card from that family. Every year they send me a Christmas card, and it's been interesting to watch. And it's like a family Christmas card with a picture of their family. And it's been interesting to watch like these twins grow up via these Christmas cards. It's a reminder that change is possible. I think sometimes we talk about like, you know, if you once a cheater, always a cheater and all of these things. But when you have hope for a new future, you have the ability to do remarkable things. When you have hope for a new future, you have the ability to do things that you previously wouldn't have thought you could do, like forgive your partner or recommit to the relationship and create a whole new dynamic that created a whole new family, and a family that is growing and beautiful and full of love and happiness. And it has sustained itself for over a decade. They sent me these really touching cards, and over the 10 years, I got to watch these babies grow and become young children. So how does it happen? It happens with a recommitment. It happens with the ability to forgive. It happens with a focus on what we're trying to accomplish. It happens with the introduction of hope. That's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned as a psychotherapist is nothing is broken to the point of being irreparable. You can get over difficult things. You can rebuild trust if you're willing to recommit, forgive, and focus on the future you're trying to create. When you're doing those things, anything is possible. And I hope that that touches you in the same way that it touched me from working with this family. So I want you to think about times in your life, because all of us have rebuilt trust with someone. I mean, maybe it's a romantic partner, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a best friend. All of us have rebuilt trust. And I want you to think, when are times in your life you rebuilt trust, and just have a think about how you did that. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing this podcast on your social media platforms and with your friends in your personal life. Please continue to do that. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcast. You can do that on Simplecast, Spotify, wherever it is you listen to your podcast. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Today I'm going to share a story that I'm not 100% sure I've ever shared publicly, or at least not in a forum like this. But I want to tell it to you because I think it tells you what happens when you trust another person and then you're rewarded with that trust and your life is forever changed. So this is an episode of this podcast that I'm really excited to talk to you about. So I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. Of course, I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and today I want to talk to you about belief and what happens when you put your belief and trust and faith in another person, and then you're so profoundly rewarded. So I want to talk to you about my career for a second. I always wanted to be someone that helped people. That's what led to me wanting to be a psychotherapist. That's what inspired me to do the work that I do. That's really kind of what drove me in the early years of my life. Now, these days I write books and I travel around the world as a lecturer and all of these things. But the truth is, I never envisioned any of this. I actually just wanted to have a therapy practice where clients would come to me and I would help them. And I thought that was going to be my life. When I started believing that change was possible, it was when I met a man named Bill O'Hanlon. What happened when I met Bill, I was actually part of an organization that hired like a speaker to come and give a lecture for this organization. And it was my job to talk to him. It was my job to like pick him up at the airport. And I ended up talking to him when he flew in, and I took him to dinner. I remember taking him to get a burger, and then I took him to his hotel. The next morning I picked him up from his hotel and I took him to the venue. And then after the event was over, I took him back to the airport. Now, the drive back to the airport was interesting, and I think about this all of the time. Interestingly, Bill O'Hanlon and I are really good friends to this day, but this experience was how I actually met him. And the drive back to the airport, Bill asked me what I intended in my career, and I told him just what I said here. I just want to be able to help clients. I want to be able to make a difference, things of that nature. And Bill said, "You have such a charismatic personality. You would be a very good lecturer. Have you ever thought about it?" And I said, "No, I don't think so." And he said, "You really would be a dynamic speaker." You know, Bill has been in this field a bazillion years, and he said, "You'd be a dynamic speaker, and I think you'd be very good in that context. Have you ever thought about it?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I think you should think about it." And he said, "You should write a book or 2 or 3, and then people will invite you onto their stages and you can give lectures." And after that, I really started thinking about my future in a different way. And I started thinking, is this true? And I started wondering, what was it that Bill saw in me that made him see that? I started thinking about, like, Bill has been in this field for, 20, 30 years. What was it? Like, what did he see in me that made him think that? But I definitely decided to trust it a bit. And I wrote a book, and I began to get invited for people to have me speak to their audiences. And before I knew it, I was traveling around the world as one of the most frequently hired lecturers in the entire field, in the entire world. But it was because I put faith and trust in Bill's opinion and what he shared with me that I tested it to see if he was right. And I realized that the potential was there. I realized that he was right. Like, I could do this thing. I could make a difference and live a much more exciting and fulfilled life and step truly into my purpose. I don't think I've ever told people that story, but I shared it here today because I hope it'll help you to stretch yourself and see the people around you that you could trust that could make a difference in your world if you just took a moment to wonder, what is it they see in me? Now, I just told you one story from my life. I want you to think back throughout your life when you put some trust in someone and how it helped you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing this podcast. Please continue to share this podcast on your social media platforms or with people in your personal life that you think could benefit from this message. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, anywhere you listen to your podcast. And I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I think one of the wonderful things about trust is there's like external trust, like learning to trust the people around you and surrounding yourself with trustworthy people and those sorts of things. But there's also internal trust where you learn to trust yourself, trust your gut, trust your intuition, trust that internal voice that seems to be trying to guide you towards prosperity and away from danger. And today, that's what we're going to be talking about. So I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I want to share a little bit with you about how, sometimes you have to go against the wave, you have to go against the crowd, you have to go against someone who you do trust and think has your best interest in mind, and trust your gut. I'm going to tell you, one of the things that I've had to learn is whenever I've trusted my gut, and look, intuition is a real thing. Like, we have intuition. It is there. It is a part of us. You know, I went to college with a guy who is now a detective. And one day we got together and we were talking about like his career and my career. And he asked me what was the thing I learned about people from being a psychotherapist that I didn't know before I became a psychotherapist. And I told him, I didn't realize people are not really most people are trying to be better and do better. They're not sick and bad. They're actually trying to be their best selves and trying to do as good as they can. And I asked him the same question. What's the thing that you learned that you didn't know prior to becoming a police officer or a detective? And he said, what I didn't realize was how consistent and accurate a person's intuition can be. And I asked him to explain. And he said, since he's become a detective, he has dealt with something like 8 homicides where a woman was murdered by her partner. And he said 7 of the 8, the woman told someone in her life, I'm going to see my partner, and if something happens to me, I want you to know that's where I was. And he was like, so if your intuition tells you you should be so concerned that you need to let your friends know where you're going, maybe we need to not go there. And there's something about that internal gut feeling that I think we have to learn how to trust. It has led to me having some real successes that I wouldn't have had otherwise. When I was starting my career, it was in the beginning of the social media and kind of online space. And everybody in my career and several people close to me were trying to caution me away from using social media and using a website to grow a following and putting a lot of my training content online and on YouTube, because they were saying it's not academic, it's not professional. But to me, it just made the most sense because my gut was just telling me this is the future. This is where things will be headed. I didn't know how or when or how quickly, but it just seemed really obvious to me that this is the future and this is where things would be headed. So I kind of went against the advice and I did what I thought was right. And I did what I thought made the most sense. And I did what sat best and felt rightest to me. And of course, 10, 15 years later, it was the future. Everything is online and everything is streamed and YouTube is now one of the biggest websites in the world. And back then, YouTube was like a plugin that we used on our MySpace page. But somehow I just thought this is where things are headed, and I wanted to be there. And because I did that, I've grown way faster and farther than some of the people who were trying to caution me and warn me. I think sometimes your gut tells you what fits rightest with you and what doesn't. Sometimes we get distracted by fear of failure, wanting to get the new big, bright, shiny thing, or whatever. But learning to trust yourself can be one of the greatest skills you could ever have. And I want everybody out there who can hear this podcast to learn that skill. I want you to think of a time in your life when you had to rely on your gut, your instincts, your intuition to make a decision. And think about a time when it really worked out for you. Thank you so much for being here. Please continue to spread this podcast. I can't grow without you, and I really appreciate your help. So share it on your social media platforms or with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can do that on Simplecast, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever it is you listen to your podcast. And I cannot wait to see you tomorrow. Today I want to talk about why it's so important to work to develop your ability to trust your intuition and hone your ability to trust yourself. I think it's one of the most important lessons you can learn and a really good way to wrap up our week as we talk about building trust. Welcome back to the Aha Moments, where every day I share the lessons from my work as a psychotherapist and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. I'm your host, Elliott Connie, and I've been talking about trust this week. And I think trust is so important, and we often think about trusting a partner or trusting a friend. But honestly, you need to be able to trust yourself. And the number one reason you have to be able to trust yourself is for reasons of self-efficacy, is so that you know that you can get through any difficult time, and you can do that independently. You can do that without having to depend on someone else. You really can depend on yourself and create a future and get through a difficult situation or overcome a problem or whatever. I think the most important lesson I ever learned is that I can deal with hard things. I've often talked about publicly, I've talked about it on this podcast, I've written about it in some of my books, but I had a difficult childhood and had lots of difficult experiences happen throughout that childhood. But one of the things that I learned throughout that process is that I can accomplish hard things and I can get through difficult moments. I think you've got to rely on yourself and you've got to trust yourself. You've got to do things that you previously didn't think you could do. You've got to get through things that you previously didn't know you could get through. You have to work to overcome hard moments so that you can rely on yourself and become your own champion. It started for me in athletics. When I was a kid, my coach used to ask me to do different exercises, like go run whatever distance and go lift weights and go do these things. And there would be this sense of doubt when my coach would ask me to do these things. But then after I did them, and sure, I'd be tired and I'd be sore and I'd be hurting, but I also had this tremendous sense of accomplishment that I had done a very difficult thing and overcome it. I had achieved. And even in life, there were times going through this difficult childhood where I genuinely did not think I would make it. There were times going through this difficult childhood where I absolutely did not think I would be able to get through this hard thing. I actually did not think I would survive it. But when I did, there was this tremendous sense of accomplishment, this tremendous sense of self-value. There was this tremendous sense of I've earned it. It was such a powerful experience for me that I almost am grateful for the difficult time. I won't even say almost. I'm grateful for the difficult times that I've been through. I wouldn't choose to go through them again, and I don't think they were all fair or right, but I do have a sense of gratefulness having gone through those things because I came out of it with a sense of self-confidence that I can trust myself to get through hard things. I can trust my intuition. I can trust my gut. Honestly, man, one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned, one of the things I'm most grateful for is that I can trust my gut and make decisions based upon what feels right to me. And the way that I learned that is by getting through really difficult things that were in fact so difficult that I did not think I'd be able to get through them myself. That's how you learn that you can deal with life. That's how you learn to overcome difficult things. That's how you learn that even when things are really, really hard and really, really challenging, you can make it. Life is really, really tough, but so are you. Life is really, really hard, but you are so capable. Challenges can really, really test us. But if you are listening to this podcast, you have habitually gotten through all of the hard moments in your life. Man, that's powerful to remember. That you can trust that you can handle difficult things. You don't have to get anxious and worried and fearful and doubtful. You can replace that with confidence because you are truly amazing. So as you go into your weekend and as you wrap up this week listening to me talk about trust, remember to trust yourself because you have gotten through all of the hard moments and difficult challenges in your life that you've ever faced. Sure, you've got scars and sure you've got wounds and you've been tested and nearly broken, but you made it. And I want you to remember that. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for doing all the things you're doing to share this podcast. Please continue to do that on your social media platforms with at least one person in your personal life that you think would benefit from hearing the messages that I share on this podcast. And don't forget to subscribe. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, wherever it is you listen to your podcast. And I cannot wait to see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.